In 2021, Yuki Kawaguchi dropped the Hunters Guild Red Hood in Weekly Shonen Jump. Now, at the time, Weekly Shonen Jump had a death grip on 17-year-old me, and I was actually paying regular attention to the series being dropped in the magazine, and Red Hood caught my eye not only for being written by a former assistant of Koei Horikoshi, the author of My Hero Academia, but also being really fucking cool. You see, the Hunters Guild Red Hood was about monster hunting, specifically a young boy named Velo who wants to become a member of the Hunters Guild and hunt down werewolves and other monsters alongside his new, hot as fuck, in her adult form, mentor Grimm. You get it? Like Grimm's fairy tales? But what really sold the story for me was the world building and presentation. I really like Kawaguchi's art style. He was an assistant for Horikoshi, and the stylistic similarities are apparent, but he gives everything this scratchy storybook quality to it that makes it feel like an ancient tale. Somewhat similar to post-timeskip One Piece, but more intentional. And that storybook fantasy aesthetic is very intentional, as Red Hood has its fantasy so high that it insert good weed joke here. Red Hood is obviously based on classic Grimm's fairy tales, but it makes the fantasy high while keeping the tales grim. Characters use guns, werewolves are eldritch monsters, the guild are money-grubbing, people die, and Grimm straight up says there's no heroes or justice in hunting. Yet, despite that, so much Red Hood felt super high concept and vibrantly fantastical. It's like something you'd find in a whimsical high fantasy novel like Lord of the Rings. Giants carrying massive trees, goofy werewolves, huge manta rays, characters fighting with fucking mold, and giant crabs with tanks stuck to their backs being piloted by smaller crabs living inside human skulls. The author really likes crabs for some reason, I don't know why. Crabs are pretty cool though. I have a feeling that the author had an entire map drawn up with individual kingdoms named and defined and plans laid out way in advance for the story. I also liked a lot of the characters. Grimm and Velo were a great duo, but I also enjoyed a lot of the party members the author was trying to build up in the entrance exam. They didn't have the most memorable personalities, but they had designs, powers, and personality quirks that were all really distinct and interesting to me. Again, it felt very One Piece inspired. One guy had a fear of leftovers for crying out loud. With all that being said, you'd have to assume Red Hood was a wild generational defining success, right? Well, if you notice Red Hood doesn't have an anime, or more than 3 volumes, or a lot of porn. It does have some though, and everything does. But chances are you may have heard of it. So what's going on here? Well, it all comes down to pacing mostly. Pacing is what most people cite as the primary reason it didn't take off. Shonen nowadays moves way faster than it did 20 years ago. No 100-chapter epilogues or 50-chapter entrance exams anymore. But even for Red Hood, 12-chapter long exam arc was too much, especially since we hadn't even seen the Hunters Guild yet. But what really pissed me off was how long it took us to leave the village. You see, the first chapter is all about showing Velo and Grimm hunting down one werewolf and going over the philosophies of hunting and protection and the guild and whatnot. But after that, they spend like 4 chapters hunting down 2 other random-ass werewolves to save the village, only for the alpha male wolf and his lesbian witch to show up and destroy it all anyways. But really, other than that, I don't have too much negative to say about Red Hood, because I really liked it. And having to see it get canceled after 18 chapters was really upsetting to me. Even though I had heard all these complaints about it, I still was holding out hope. I'll admit the pacing wasn't great, but I was willing to stick it out because I really just wanted to see where it went. I liked the world and all that. The ending that they were forced to do, however, made it really stick out more than before. But how did the Hunters Guild Red Hood end?
I'm glad you asked me that. And I will be happy to tell you how. But you're all gonna have to listen up. Because this is where it gets complicated.
You see, the story ends with Velo reaching the Hunters Guild and realizing the leader of the guild is actually in possession of a magic book that controls all of reality and can have stories written into it that will happen in real life, meaning many of the real-world deaths and tragedies were caused by the guild itself. After asking why the hell they would do all of this, Velo is informed that the book is given to humanity by the readers, godly beings who want humanity to write stories into the book in order to entertain them, and if they don't like said stories, they reset the world and start over. Velo also finds out that he is in fact not a real human being, but an artificial boy created by the mayor of his village who is actually an extremely powerful sorcerer and former guild member who stole a page from the book and created Velo with the ability to destroy the book by touching it in order to bring a sudden and peaceful end to their pointless and painful existence, and also he's still alive and shows up at the end. Yeah. Now, I heard some people say at the time that Kawaguchi just came up with this ending in order to vent his frustrations against Shonen Jump, and while I do think he was definitely venting some anger, the gods are called the readers for crying out loud, I do think he had all this planned out from the start. All this made many people, myself included, upset that Red Hood got axed, and many of us hoped Kawaguchi would come back with a vengeance. But 4 years is a long time to wait, and I've changed a lot since then. I've graduated high school, moved out, started attending college, and my views on a lot of media have changed since then. You see, with the downfall of My Hero Academia and Jujutsu Kaisen, I've fallen out of my love for the big 3 inspired shonen. I'd say it's more fatigue than anything else, but regardless of how much acclaim Kawaguchi and Gachiakuta get, I'm less and less inclined to check them out as it's just not an aesthetic I'm feeling all that much right now. On top of that, as a number of series on the Shonen Jump app I was interested in begin to dwindle and be replaced with gag manga, which at this point I feel makes up like half the magazine, to be honest. I mean, the most recent one was called Nice Prison. I didn't renew my subscription. So it was honestly by almost complete chance that I just so happened to check out the most recent new series and find out that Kawaguchi had in fact returned with a new series that feels just like the new and improved Red Hood in Otr of The Flame. If his Twitter art wasn't evident enough, Otr shows just how much Kawaguchi clearly loves fantasy. As we return to another fantasy setting, only this time without the intricate subversive details of Red Hood. I mean that positively.
Okay, I'm editing the video right now and I'm just outside taking a break, but I wanted to say that I don't necessarily think it's bad that when things are nuanced or interesting or like intricate, because I like nuanced, complicated, interesting things. But what I meant by this is that, for one, I'm glad that Otr isn't gonna overload us with like an insane amount of world building and like extremely complicated things, because that can get, it's very cool, especially when Red Hood did it, but it can get up to be a bit much at times, and going with something simple also works. And I'm also just glad, as I'm going to say later, that Otr was able to stick to a very simple premise and simple dichotomy and sort of take a different approach that Red Hood didn't. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Remember I said Kawaguchi probably mapped out the entire Red Hood world and named every single kingdom? Yeah, well in Otr we know 2 kingdoms so far, and they are the Ice Kingdom and the Forest Kingdom. The Ice Kingdom is full of evil ice monsters who many years ago started a war of aggression that plunged the land into an eternal winter. Our main character Otr wants to join the fight and be a warrior like the ones from the legendary sagas, but because he's a child he can only sign up as a cook/firebearer. Fire is extremely important and symbolic in Otr and helps set it apart from Red Hood. Whereas Red Hood had a lot of gray morality and a depressing state of the world with no clear obvious hope, Otr is very clear in its dichotomy of good and evil. Ice is cold and cruel, harming people and bringing about destruction and desolation, while fire keeps people alive, warms their hearts and spirits, and burns bright and hot enough to melt any opposition. Very Gurren Lagann. Red Hood really loved to bask in its vibe, and Otr does the same thing. The art is incredible. Beautiful spreads, great character and creature design, and a setting that feels very grandiose and legendary despite its dark setting. It gets even more like the stories of legend when our protagonist's company gets attacked by the Ice Kingdom and he must form a bond with a fire spirit who looks like a little anime girl and undergo a magical girl transformation to get a massive fire sword and defeat the ice monsters. This is honestly where it starts to lose me, but not by much, really. Earlier in the chapter, the captain of the company, a buff warrior lady with huge tits, Author clearly has a type, tells Otr that being a cook makes him as much of a warrior as anyone else there, as he's braving the war in cold with them. This gave me a momentary delusion that our protagonist wouldn't actually do much fighting and would solely be a cook in the war. I don't know how they really would have done that, but it would have been interesting to see them pull it off, and certainly a more unique approach than the sudden unlocking of powers in the darkest hour many shonen are accustomed to. Anyway, let's talk about those powers. The sword kicks ass, and so does the motif of fire. Considering the bleak, overwhelming power of the Ice Kingdom, it would make sense for humans to be relatively weak physically in comparison to the monsters. So having a protagonist who is weak on a purely physical level but fights with overwhelming heat is a really cool idea. I don't know if it'll stay that consistent, but it would be cool. On that note, I'm not a huge fan of his transformed outfit either, and it's not even because he's barely clothed. Having a character wear almost nothing in this frozen wasteland to show that he doesn't need to keep any warmer because of how hot his fire burns is great. And also showcases how despite being so small and scrawny, he'll still stand up to the overwhelming odds. It's mainly just his weird little tank top I don't like. I don't know why, I'm just not a fan. His little spirit character, Filga? I think it's Filga. I'm also mixed on her. Most of the gripes of this part come from it being more classic shonen stuff I've grown tired of, and the fire spirit is one of those. It goes from a mysterious and vague force, to having a voice, to being an anthropomorphized anime girl, which all makes it feel a lot closer to the inner demon tropes you've seen in a lot of popular shonen. However, I'm not fully turned off by it, as I like her design and I'm starting to warm up to her personality. She gives off the vibe of a little fey spirit, and the fact that she's also basically a newborn means she likely won't have the same overwhelming innate power or knowledge that Sukuna, Zangetsu, One For All, and to some extent Lieb had in Black Clover. Overall, while I have my reservations about it, I really did enjoy Otr of the Flame and hope it succeeds and continues to get better. It's really interesting seeing the differences between this and Red Hood. I have a theory that people are moving away from morally gray and complex villains and conflicts and into the more black and white good versus evil of storytelling at this time. Everyone glazed Sukuna for being a refreshing take on the inner demon by just being pure evil, and many criticize JJK for not having a concise resolution and just admitting that everyone is a cog and returning to the corrupt status quo. I put Red Hood close to Berserk on how I viewed life. Both of them believing life to be inherently cruel and painful with no real path towards salvation, but despite that we should keep living, as it's inherently worth being alive despite all the pain. On the contrary, Otr is a lot closer to Gurren Lagann, as I said before. Both of them use fire and spiral power respectively to represent their form of willpower / fighting spirit / soul energy, which constantly pushes back against the tide of despair represented by its opposite. Not to mention, Otr fixed the pacing issues that Red Hood had, presumably at least. I don't know, it's only chapter 1, who knows where it'll go. Within the first chapter, our main character already has his powers and is a part of the army, which means he can get straight to fighting. I'm gonna go off script here a little bit and just say that I really hope that Otr manages to take off. Like, I really liked Red Hood when it came out, and I really just, it's weird, I don't want to get on this thing's, like, I don't want to glaze Otr for just being a Kawaguchi manga, because I just kind of really want him to succeed as well, but, like, I just really fuck with his style. Like, this grandiose, all this fantasy shit really appeals to me, and I just really want to see it take off. And I think that he has potential to get it going somewhere really good. But the other thing is that a lot of it just sort of relies on his, like, on mainly going off of vibes. Like, Red Hood and Otr both have a really strong aesthetic to them and, like, a really good vibe to them. But the thing is that helps a lot, but it really can't carry you there if your foundations are fucked up. Like, I was playing the game Slitterhead recently, and that game had a really cool concept. You know, you're hopping between bodies to fight these monsters that you have to track down through this insanely, like, densely populated city. But the problem is, the game just wouldn't let me fucking play it. Like, every time there's some dialogue, anytime my character talks, it has to stop and go. It has to either pause the game or stop to go into a little fucking cutscene and be like, oh, the Slitterhead there was a Slitterhead here, ooh, and then you just can't play the game, and it pisses me off. And that's what I'm kind of saying happens with Otr, it doesn't happen with Otr, but it happened with Red Hood, and it could happen with Otr, where, you know, it just didn't have its pacing down, and it just didn't have everything mechanically there. And so, you know, the style couldn't hold most people long enough, and it upset me, not enough to get me to stop reading like Slitterhead did. I stopped playing that game, but enough to upset me and to get a lot of people off with it. I actually bought two volumes of Red Hood. My Barnes & Noble had them, and I was like, they didn't have the first one, but they had the last two. They had 2 and 3, and I was like, I talk about Red Hood so much, so I may as well just get these. But yeah, I really want to see where this goes. I'm really excited to see where this goes. I might cut this part out because I'm doing like a channel update is weird when I only have this is like my 3rd video or like my 4th video or whatever, but it's my first like real longest video I've put a lot of time into. I want to keep uploading on this channel more. If this video isn't the best quality, it's because, one, it's my first time really doing like a full on, like a actually produced video. And also, I really just want to get a video out because I just want to get into the swing of making YouTube videos and editing and doing this kind of thing. So I'm going to be experimenting a lot and just kind of see what takes off on this channel. And that's probably what I'll keep up with. So if you guys like these discussion videos, then, you know, just like them. You already know how to do that. I don't need to tell you. But yeah, thanks for listening. I hope Red Hood does good. And yeah, I'm in the closet right now. You can hear my head rustling around on the clothes. Yeah, I want to make more videos.